enjoying the 2014 World Cup?
Yes.
Since it's a global event, it can bring us all together. Like the World Cup, GIC is a great way for us all to get along with each other. So don't enjoy the World Cup, but also come to the GIC as well. Before I introduce today's speaker, would you please either turn off your cell phone or switch them to silent mode? Thank you. Now, let's move on to today's talk. Today's speaker is Dr. David Shaffer.
Shaffer.
He has been invited to the talk as a special guest for the International Understanding Lecture. He is currently a professor of the English Language Department at Chosun University. He is going to talk about the awareness of learning and teaching language. As you know, learning another language has become necessary these days. So we should be aware of how to learn languages effectively. Let's learn how to learn and how to teach language effectively and what wrong beliefs we should change. So, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to see so many people here today. I would have been here earlier myself, except that I left my USB back in the computer, so I had to go back home and get that. I'm not really talking about how to teach today. It's more about misbeliefs that people in general have about learning languages, and a little about misbeliefs in teaching languages. Popular beliefs and fairy tales is what the title is. They're like rumors. They start out by someone who doesn't really know something for sure. And they tell people and they tell other people, and it just sort of snowballs into a belief that most people have. And some of those, especially those that are common to Korean learners of English and their parents, I'm going to talk about today. I'm planning on going through, there's about 10 that I have, and I'm planning on going through each of those, and then afterwards we can go back over and I can take your questions on those. I've heard that this is a very talkative group, so I decided to do it that way so we could get through the 10 for sure. Okay, see, the first one I have is start with the ABCs. When teaching language to children, it's common, when teaching English to second language learners, it's common to think that, well, we should start teaching the ABCs first. And I should quit pushing this when I don't want to. Okay. Actually, when I went to school, when I first started learning English in a classroom, that's what I learned first, ABCs. And there was nothing wrong with it. That was fine. But my situation was a little different than the Korean situation. Right? I had grown up in an English-speaking country, and I had grown up speaking English as my first language. I already knew English. I was 6 years old when I started elementary school. And probably that's when I started learning my ABC. I knew the language. English was already a network in my brain. But when you start teaching English as a second language to someone, English is not there already. And besides, if you want to teach English well, English is a language. The ABCs are not a language. If you want to teach a language, you don't have to teach the ABCs. That's not a language, it's an alphabet. And it is used in English, it is part of the language, but it's not the main part. When teaching a language, what should we start with? Which of the skills should we start with? Of the four basic skills. Reading, writing, listening, or speaking. Listening, speaking. Think about your first language. When you were learning Korean or whatever your first language was, did you start with reading? Listening, right. When you learn a second language, the same order is really the most natural, shall we say? In our first language, we listen first. In fact, for several years before we do any speaking. And then we speak, and we listen and speak and listen and speak and learn the language for many years. And then finally we start to read and then write. Alphabet, the ABCs are necessary for reading. And really, that is a secondary skill. I consider listening and speaking the primary skill, and reading and writing secondary skills. And they're used to show the language instead of listen to it. Am I doing this? I know what's happening. It's on automatic. Please turn automatic off. Go into illustration. Go into illustration. Illustration. Go into illustration. And turn off the timer. 0. Okay, that'll work. Thank you. Okay. So, the ABC should not be first. When starting with a second language, starting with English, with Koreans for example, we should start and have them listen. Not have them speak first, have them listen. Have them do a lot of listening, and that will make speaking easier. Did you turn it off? Okay, the second misconception is about, should we study TOEIC? To learn English, should we study TOEIC? Yes or no? No. Yes or no? Should we study TOEIC to learn English?
No.
No? Well, so many people do it.
Because to getting a better job.
What does TOEIC stand for? Test of English for International Cooperation. The T is for test. It's a test. It's not a study method. It's a test. What TOEIC is meant to do is to evaluate your English level. It's to evaluate your proficiency. It's not a method of improving our English skills. If we want to improve our speaking isn't on. If we want to improve our listening skills, we should practice listening. If we want to improve our reading or writing skills, we should practice reading and writing. And if we want to practice vocabulary and grammar, those are the things that are stressed in TOEIC. If we want to do that, we should really do a lot of reading. A lot of reading. Casual reading. Not difficult reading. Easy reading. Enjoyable reading. That's probably how you learned most of your vocabulary in your first language. through reading. Your vocabulary and grammar. You heard a lot. You learned a lot through listening, but you probably learned more through reading. So the TOEIC, it stresses facts about the language. If you take a test, a TOEIC test, it's asking you about facts. It doesn't ask you, speak to me. Am I doing better? It's about the facts, and skills and facts are two completely different things when we're talking about language. Facts about English, we learn like we learn facts about history. The Korean War began on June 25th, 1950. That's a fact. 7 times 7 is 49. That's a fact. Gerund form of go is going. Gerund form of dance is dancing. That's a fact. Okay? That's stored in one part of our brain. And that's not the same part of our brain that we use for speaking and listening for language. That's really a different part of the brain. So, we need to practice the skills in order to learn the language. We need to know the facts in order to do well on the TOEIC test, but that's something completely different than learning the language. So, studying for TOEIC does not really produce skills. It should produce a higher TOEIC score, but it doesn't produce better skills or much better skills. Some people have a very high TOEIC score, 900 something. Those are very good TOEIC scores. Some of those people can't speak English very well at all. So, speaking English, using English, and knowing the facts about English are not closely related. What's next? Memorize vocabulary and grammar rules. Rote memorization of vocabulary and grammar rules is great for improving your knowledge of the second language. That's true, isn't it? Memorization is probably the most common thing that language learners do in high school. Memorizing vocabulary, memorizing grammar rules. Rote. Who's moving?
It's still tested.
Can you turn, it says turn off all. Go into, just go into, animation. Okay. No, where does it say? Turn them all off. Is there somewhere it says turn them all off? Modu. Turn it to 0. 영어로 바꾸고 모두 표현. Okay? Thank you. Now maybe our slide will stop dancing. Maybe this is more interesting though than me. Maybe that was good. Let's go back one more. Okay. And we were saying, memorization is the most common thing for high school students learning English. So it must be good. Teacher presents information, the students memorize it, and then the students are tested on it. Oh, but, things that we just memorize, we easily forget. Everyone, me included, especially me included. What we need to do to learn things is to associate them with many different things. Usually what is done for vocabulary, something like friend is associated with 친구, friend, 친구, nothing else, just one association. Friend is 친구 in Korean. What we need though is many other associations. We need to pronounce it, we need to write it, we need to read it in sentences, we need to hear it in sentences, and we need to hear it used in a context. If we hear it in a context, we'll find out that friend does not equal 친구. Our dictionary says they do, they don't. For example, in a context, we'll see a sentence that says, the old man considered the young boy to be a friend. Old man, young boy, friend. Well, that's not 친구, right? So they aren't exactly the same. We need to meet these things in context. Just memorizing, rote memorization is not enough. Said, we need comprehensible input. Comprehensible input is a fancy word for things that we hear in English and things that we read in English. Input. Language coming in by reading or listening. And that will be in a context, and in a context we will learn how to use grammar rules and how to understand vocabulary. Yes. The next misconception is about high-level reading material. A lot of college students, entering freshmen, their language level is average for an entering freshman, and they say, I need to improve my reading. I want to join a club. Okay, I'll join the Time Magazine Club. Great. Time Magazine is high level, so if I study high level material, I'll have high level reading ability. Okay, the thing is, their ability at present is here. Time Magazine is way up here, and they're not going to improve very quickly because the material is at not their level. It's at a much higher level than they're able to understand yet. If anyone's level in a language is here, what you need to improve is material that is a little above your level. Then you improve, then you use a little more difficult material. It's like going up steps. If the steps are 30 centimeters high, it's much easier to walk up 10 steps than to walk up one step that is 300 centimeters high, right? So Time Magazine, when you're at this level, try to read Time Magazine. It's like trying to walk up, 300 centimeter step. You can't do it. But you can go up 10, 30 centimeter steps much more easily. Reading material now, there's lots of reading material available through graded readers. They're books for language learners, for English learners. And they're like 6 levels that you can choose from. So one of those levels will be your level, and doing a lot of reading is helpful for learning the language. What did I miss? Is crashing I+1 is just a little above your level. And really, for most effective reading, they say if you understand 95 or more % of the material easily, that's what you should be reading in the second language. Then if you come across words or grammar that you aren't sure of, from the context, you can get a good idea of what it means. often because you understand almost everything else. Studying abroad? Of course, studying abroad in an English-speaking country should be good for improving your English proficiency. But there's a but here also. Okay, there are quality schools available. Of course, not all of them are quality, but there are quality schools available. There are qualified teachers there. And there are many opportunities to use English. Everyone speaks English. So this is all good. But there's other things to consider. At some schools, in Canada for sure, I know some students who went to a certain language school in Vancouver, especially. And they went to the first class and they were surprised. About 70–80% of the students were from Korea. Now, that's like a lot of classrooms here. So what are you going to do? Break time, what are you going to do? Probably Korean. Talk to Koreans in Korean. After classes, what are you going to do? You're probably going to go downtown with Koreans and speak Korean. So, that is one thing you want to avoid, really. What else? You're in a new country. Never been here before. Never been there before. And there are many things to see. So you can travel on weekends. But then weekends aren't enough to see everything you want to see. So you skip some classes, and you skip some more classes. And then you finally just stop going to class and travel. There are students like that. So the desire to travel takes over. And you spend the money for your school that you already paid for, and you spend a lot of money traveling. What else? The nightlife. You can spend a lot of money on nightlife, drinking. And some people have gone to Nevada, Reno, Nevada, and all the casinos there, and lost a lot of money that way. Another thing, you're away from family, and that's hard for some people, to be away from the family. Others are happy to be away from family, but some have a hard time with that. So there are disadvantages to studying abroad. And for some people, they turn into very big disadvantages. But for others, they are big advantages. So it's something to consider, not just the advantages, but also the disadvantages that might be involved. Okay. For learning a language, the younger, the better. The younger you start with your child, or as a child learning a language, the better it is for language learning. That seems to be what is the common thought here. It was in middle school that we used to begin teaching English. Middle school, first year. Then it dropped down to elementary school, third year, where it's at now. But the government has been considering lowering it to first year. And whether the government lowers it or not, parents are having their children learn English, maybe with a tutor at home, maybe at an outside language school. But they're learning English earlier than third grade. So, this should all be good, right? You think that second languages are easier to learn, or easier for even very young learners. Language learning is more difficult after adolescence, so we should begin early. But there are some things to consider. Teaching techniques. Teaching young learners, and especially teaching very young learners, requires a different set of teaching techniques than teaching middle school or teaching college students. Much different. Young children, their brain has not developed completely yet. So they don't have analytical skills that we do after adolescence. And so we have to teach them very differently. Cost, actually, for the amount of learning that takes place, if they, at a young age, it takes longer. So if it takes longer, more resources are required, more hours, more teaching hours. It costs more to teach young learners. But that doesn't make young bad. It just costs more. And some people think, oh, it's easy for young learners to learn a language. Actually, it's not easy for them. They struggle too. It's not easy, but young learners have a desire to learn. They have a desire to learn much more than an adult. It's sort of built in. It's natural that they're curious. They want to learn. So it happens. We would rather sit back and watch TV and munch on potato chips or ojimol or something. One thing, though, is true. For pronunciation, very young learners who are, what is the word? Who have a lot of listening to a lot of English when they're young, they will grow up without an accent, without a first language accent. They'll have a more native accent, learning young. My children, for example, they didn't start really speaking much English until in elementary school, and really after that. They were born and raised here in Korea. But I spoke some English at home, some Korean, some English, and they don't have a Korean accent when speaking English. And it's from listening to it, not from it being a first language. Korean was actually their first language. Okay, let's go on. Early study abroad. Well, we talked about studying abroad having problems. We talked about some things to be careful of with young learners and starting language early. What about early study abroad? Well, there's some other things to consider. A lot of that is happening these days. Many families are having their children study abroad at an early age. And that should be living in the L2 environment can be helpful in learning the language. Yes, that is all true. But we will see, it costs a lot of money, right? If just the child is sent abroad to study, it costs a lot of money. If the mother goes along, it costs even more money. And if several children and the mother go, it costs even more money. So there's the money problem. There's also the problem of readapting to the Korean situation when the family returns. Maybe returning and going to high school in Korea. That is very difficult for some students because, let's say, the North American education system and the Korean education system are very different. They have difficulty adjusting. And another difficulty is usually the father stays here, keeps his job, stays here, makes the money to support the family that's abroad. And if the husband and wife are separated, it could lead to not so not so good marital relations. Just the fact being apart can cause those kinds of problems too. So there are disadvantages to sending a child abroad. I think that for a young child, the most important thing for them when young is to be with their parents. Parents, not one, both parents. I think that's very important. English is not more important than a child growing up with their parents. But maybe that's just me. Okay, let's go on. Games for learning. Games for learning. Games may be useful for motivation, but they are ineffective as a language learning tool. This is the thought I seem to recognize in many people. Yes, the game, we can motivate our students. If they're tired or something, we can motivate them with a game. But they're really not good for learning a language. If you want to learn something, it takes work. You have to work and sweat. Learning a language is hard. That's the concept that I seem to get from many Koreans. But is that really true? Learning languages or learning anything really should be fun. And if it's enjoyable, students are going to learn faster. That's why memorization, I don't like to hear the word because it's not fun and no one likes to do it. And if you don't like to do something, you're not going to do it well. So really, everything, as teachers, everything we do with our students should be enjoyable in some way. Learning is enhanced by interesting content. It doesn't have to be a game, but it should be interesting. And games are very useful in language learning if they are made well or selected well. We can use some games that are not made for language learning and adapt them to language learning. We can make our own games for language learning purposes too. But the content is important. We should have a language focus in the game. And nests are best. NEST stands for Native English-Speaking Teachers. This seems to be another misbelief that I find here in Korea. Native speakers are the best teachers. Some language institutes at universities and outside of universities. Language institutes often have pictures of their native speaker teachers. They advertise their program through pictures of their teachers. And these pictures of their teachers are almost always, what color skin? White. What color hair? Blonde. What color eyes? Blue. That seems to be the concept of the best teacher. White, blonde hair, blue eyes. But skin color, hair color, what did I miss? Eye color, have nothing to do with teaching. They have nothing to do with teaching. Many people can have beautiful eyes, beautiful hair, and beautiful skin complexion, and can't teach at all. Teaching is a skill, something that you need to learn to do. Just by being able to speak English as your first language doesn't make you a good teacher of it. It doesn't make you someone who understands it well either. Grammar rules. Native speakers are not good at telling you grammar rules. They're good at telling you this is correct grammar, this is not good correct grammar. That's intuitive. You just know it's correct. It sounds right. But teaching why it's this way, a lot of people can't do it. Even among English teachers, even among trained English teachers, a lot aren't good at explaining grammar. I ask a lot of Koreans questions about Korean grammar. I get a lot of Koreans who go, right? You don't need to know the grammar rules of your first language. So, we don't. Okay, what else did I say? Nests have excellent English skills, proficiency, yeah, and they have clear usage intuitions, and they make great language models. A model, someone who can speak the language, carry on a conversation. But, let's try that again. But, they might be weak in grammar and teaching skills, I said, and nests may not have L1 knowledge or understanding of their students' problem. Many English teachers, native English teachers, don't know a second language. Don't know any second language. And many of them don't know Korean, or don't know Korean very well. So they really can't understand their students' problems. They don't understand why they don't understand a certain grammar construction in English, and so forth. But native Korean teachers will know this, and in that way, they are much better as an English teacher than most native speakers. Okay, the last one, tongue surgery. This has been very popular, has been very popular. I thought it died out, and then I saw it in the papers again. More of it is still happening. And this just makes no sense to me. It makes no sense that a parent would have someone cut their child's tongue. Unless the child has problems speaking Korean, their first language. If they have a speech problem that is caused by a deformed tongue, then maybe surgery would help. But most people, when born, most children can learn any languages. Their tongue is a universal language tongue. You can learn any language with that tongue. We shouldn't be cutting it. We shouldn't be cutting it. Why? Because cutting the muscle gives you less control of the tongue. If you can't control your tongue, is that going to make your pronunciation better? No. We need control of the tongue. Cutting the muscle is giving us less control, and it could cause us to have problems with pronunciation. It can cause scarring. And scarring actually contracts the muscles and things, and that would actually shorten the tongue. And the reason for the surgery is to do the opposite. So, what else? The first one I said, anybody can learn to speak any language as their first language with any normal tongue. So, please don't encourage anyone to have their tongue operated on for better pronunciation. Unless, of course, they do have a tongue that is deformed in some way. And I think that is the last slide. Yes, it is. So, thank you for listening attentively.